Why are you so ugly? Oh, humans, you're back! To recap, last time I think we discovered that the end level triggers in Super Mario Bros. Are used to convey that jumping equals fun. This time, I want to take that jaunt through the rest of the series so that hopefully we can ascertain three things. One, why these games are so consistently good, why each game feels cohesive despite their seemingly random assortment of enemies, visuals, and mechanics, and 3, why these games, despite the differences, feel like they all fit together. And before we begin, I want to address the third point very quickly, as some of you might just bring up the fact that it's because Mario's in all of them, you dumbass. And I don't find that to be a particularly good thing to say. It's not very satisfying because pure iconography doesn't really give you cohesion. If you just look at Bethesda's Fallouts and how they feel and compare them to Interplay's Fallout and how they feel to play, it's very different, the experiences. And even within the Mario series, you have Super Mario Bros. 2, which was basically just a rebranded Doki Doki Panic, and I will maintain that that game doesn't feel like it belongs with the rest of the ones that I'm going to be talking about later. So with that all being said, let's all go on this adventure together. Super Mario Bros. 2, The Lost Levels. I personally don't have much to say about this, but I will refer to this blog post by Destructoid alum/user Tristero, which was written in 2007. So I just, that just makes me feel very old. Anyway, I think this is a pretty good reading on why this game is meaningful. Otherwise, though, we can't really use the lens from before explicitly, since the flagpole and everything is the same. The only difference is that the level design is much more punishing. This difference, though, is notable as changes to common design language can end up revealing a game's theme. This is especially true within a series, as changes to language and iconography can be somewhat alienating, and so are probably done for a reason. With that being said, if Mario 1 is the fun of jumping, then with the difference in design here, I'm willing to categorize Mario 2 as the fun of overcoming difficulty. Super Mario Bros. 3. Alright, here we go. This is where things get interesting. We have the first divergence of the use of the end level trigger. So if in Mario 1, the flagpole required timing your jump to get the most points, in Super Mario Bros. 3, this card box requires that, but also pattern matching. It also gives you a more useful reward. So in a way, this card box is an extension of the flagpole, giving the player a further level of decision making and reward. So if we take this as a base, we can reveal the game's hand. The world map is an extension of the linear nature of previous games' level after level system. It gives the player added choice on occasion with the branching paths. The game also has an inventory system. This gives the player a choice, not only on the map to bypass levels or remove obstacles, but also in what power-up they want to start a level with. Check out the bonus houses. Functionally, this is completely random to the eyes of the player, which would allow you, as a designer, to use just one chest. Yet they use 3. I think this is to emphasize player choice. This is also reflected in the change to the warp pipes, which are now warp whistle. These things go in your inventory and you can use them whenever you want, rather than statically being part of specific levels. I'm not all that satisfied with just player choice as the theme, though. I think there are too many things that don't quite fit. To me, the player choice thing is a smaller element of augmented play. Choice is used as an addition to the basic platforming and level selection of before, but there are so many other things that fit into this broader category. The basic run has been augmented with P-speed. This couples itself with the raccoon suit such that you can fly now. This reveals that power-ups, too, have been augmented to combo. They added wings to Goombas, which don't really have much value as you already had Flying Koopas filling that role. But it makes sense to do this as part of this theme of augmentation. This broadening of the theme also allows us to incorporate the idea of Big Land. And functionally, there's not much to Big Land, it's just really amusing to have everything be big, which fits in much better with augmented play than player choice. Alright, Super Mario Bros. 3, the first of what I am going to label as the creativity explosion games. It's all about the fun of augmented play, and it allows us to expand our language of the series. Oh yeah, there's the thing. Super Mario World, we have another first, with the game breaking from the naming convention of the series. And on the surface, a game that seems pretty random. You have this world map, you have this new Yoshi mechanic thing, you have these rhino guys, Resnors I think they're called. Bowser has like a flying ship that he flies around with, and you have to like hit him with these like clockwork robot things. So with all of that, how do all of these things fit together? Well, if the other games are anything to go by, let's look at the end level trigger. It's different again. It's much more similar to the flagpole. It's a goalpost with this moving bar or tape or ribbon or whatever you want to call it. What's happening here? I mean, to reach the tape, you have to not only time your jump/approach, but figure out the timing of it. So is the game about timing? Let's look elsewhere in the game and see if this hypothesis holds true. And yes, I am aware that there are levels that have multiple end-level triggers. We'll get to that later. Let's look at the power-ups. The raccoon suit tied into the previous game's themes, so maybe we should look at that for World. You have the P-balloon, which is a temporary, timed power-up. The cape is also interesting because it's so similar to the raccoon suit, but the ability to be able to fly and control it properly, you need to understand its timing and the button presses that you need to make it work. I think they chose a different power-up rather than just reuse the raccoon suit in order to differentiate the two things in your mind, since they are thematically different, yet more or less function the same. Yoshi is also a whole new mechanic introduced here, and check this out. Does that remind you of anything? To me, Yoshi is just a horizontally timed challenge, just like the goalposts are vertically timed challenges. So cool, the power-ups seem to fit. What else? If you look at the game's level design, so much of it is geared around the idea of timing. Now, I won't go into all of these, but you have many sections in the game where you're riding a platform and just waiting for things to happen, or things of that nature. The mini-bosses also require timing. As you progress, the challenge that is added is based on timing. The rooms get smaller, things start disappearing. The P-blocks are also very often used in these levels, and they're all time-based challenges as well. You also have the Bowser battles. Look, if this doesn't convince you that this game is about timing, I'm not sure what will. The battle involves you waiting Bowser's attacks out, as per usual, but then he'll drop some Mecha Koopas, which you can stomp on and grab. You then have to time your throw, not only to avoid the bottom of his aircraft, but also to land a hit on his head. Also, think about the weapon that you're using. It's not shells, it's not blocks, or other things that you can grab and throw in the game. No, it's specifically the Mecha Koopas, the one thing in the game that visually and functionally convey the theme. What about the map? So here is where we address the secret end-level triggers that I was talking about earlier. When unlocking these, the map changes and adds a path that you wouldn't normally have. The map itself also has these buttons that when pressed will change the state of some levels. So this game actually has two themes, timing and changes in state. Notice how Goombas, which don't really have different states, aren't in world. But Koopas are all over the place. And not only that, they added in additional states, where they can be knocked out of their shells, and they can climb these fence things, which is another example of state, as you can be behind or in front of the fence. There are plenty of other examples of these two themes, both independently shown and fused together in some places, like Drybone's inclusion and the Mecha Koopas. But I'll stop here and say that I think it's interesting that they decided to call this game Super Mario World instead of Super Mario Bros. 4. Now, I would like to think that they did that because they realized that the game was about changing the state of the world and ceding some control to external or the world's timing. Super Mario 3D World. It might seem odd to cover this here, given it was released after Galaxy 2, but it makes a lot of sense if we dive in. What's interesting about 3D World is that it uses flagpoles, just like the original Super Mario Bros., except now they're modeled and function in 3D. So is that the theme? 2D to 3D. So we know that maps can tie into theme. Oh. You can freely run around the top of them now, as if to point out that you're no longer constrained by that dimension anymore. Huh. On the topic of being constrained, isn't it interesting that this game so prominently features a clock that extends the time limit of a level? Almost as if the idea is to make our fourth dimensional constraint, as humans, much more mutable. What about the Bowser battles? Well, this is pretty neat too, because you're not really fighting Bowser so much as doing regular platforming while he pops in and out trying to get you. This absolutely matches the theme, as Bowser battles are conventionally one-room affairs where you dodge his attacks and wait for an opening. This time, you have to dodge his attacks while also platforming. And the one room is now a vertical climb, adding another dimension to the battle. There are also multiple Bowsers which pop in and out, which I think makes them feel like they're higher dimensional beings that are basically just toying with you. There's plenty of other stuff too, like how the pipes, which are prominent in the marketing, are transparent, showing their dimension. The Clone Cherry is a new addition which forces you to have to think about controlling multiple points in space rather than just one. The Catsuit's abilities, climbing and diving, sort of lock you to a 2D plane, but you can decide the direction, which makes it sort of 3D. And this plane locking thing is used liberally throughout the level design, with much of the platforming shifting from one plane on the same axis, or sharply shifting 90 degrees to another. Often, stars, which in 3D games are reward systems, award you for shifting and or thinking of the game in 3D when you've been playing mostly in 2D. And this reward system tying into the theme is exemplified in the Captain Toad levels. Think about it. These levels, you're not playing Mario, yet you can get stars for doing this little adventure, and they are all about dimensionality. The jump isn't as much the point in this game because you can have fun with dimension without it. And so even though you aren't playing Mario or really doing any platforming, it fits the game because it amplifies the theme. I hope I've convinced you that this is what the game is going for, because you gotta check this out. Super Mario World showed us that the theme can be hinted at through the title. So how is Super Mario 3D World a hint at dimensionality? Even though it does reference Mario games more broadly, the main structure and iconography that it takes from is the 2D Marios. So you have Super Mario Bros. 1 that gives you the end level triggers, the flagpoles. You have Super Mario 3, the return of the Raccoon Mario airship-ish levels and the bonus houses. And then you have Super Mario World that gives you the map progression and the power-up box. And then all you're left with is D. for dimension. Isn't that neat? I think that's super neat. I think that's just amazing. So, Super Mario 3D World. The fun of shifting dimensions. Super Mario 64. Now that 3D World has allowed us to shift dimensions, we are fully in 3D and have to change how we think about the end level triggers somewhat, as they are just rewards now and aren't in and of themselves revealing of the theme. Stars and other end level triggers in these more sandboxy 3D Marios are used to reward you for doing stuff within the game. So rather than directly tying into the theme, they are used as rewards for doing the thematic thing. So with that in mind, I don't think it is very outlandish to say that Mario 64 rewards exploration. 64 leaves the linearity of the 2D games behind, and instead of proper levels, you get these sandboxes that you repeatedly go back into to get more stars. What differs between each visit is the nature of what you do in that sandbox. Each star focuses your attention on a specific task, usually a different part of that space. And by exploring and figuring things out, you get your star reward. The map has evolved into a hub world now, which reflects that theme. Progression in Mario 64 is not moving from point to point on a map, it involves running around a huge castle, opening doors and exploring its rooms. There are more things that tie into this as well, like how sandboxes reward you for collecting 100 coins, as well as including a red coin challenge, which evokes that sort of scavenger hunt feel. What's different with all of this is that 64 doesn't call these sandboxes levels, lands, or worlds. They're called courses, which is where we get the second theme of Super Mario 64, clearing obstacles. See, early on in development, the team at Nintendo structured levels to be more like they were in 2D. And the remnants of that design are still in the game. Each approach to a Bowser battle is designed in this way, and I think a large part of why the levels are called courses is not just the holdout of these levels being included, but because many of the stars you get involve using Mario's expanded moveset to overcome obstacles. These spinning platforms, these boulders, the slides. For me, they invoke that feeling of watching one of those game shows where people need to run around obstacle courses and, of course, there are races that award stars as well, often involving you dodging other obstacles. I can't find much reason to include the Bowser battles in this reading, which is a bit unfortunate, but hey, I'll give them a pass of pioneering the 3D platforming genre. So Super Mario 64 is about how exploring and clearing obstacles is fun, and we get to add another language thingo to our list. Isn't that neat? Now, what do I do? Solve for parody? What is that? Super Mario Sunshine. Oh, yes, Sunshine. The most divisive game of all of the Mario titles. And it was legitimately the hardest one for me to pin down, and I'm still not all that satisfied with my reading, but it's the best I got, and that might go into some way to explaining why the game is as divisive as it is. And I'm just going to go straight out and say that I think that the game is all about fluidity, and here's my evidence for that reading. The Flood is a water fluid-based mechanic that adds a lot of extra movement options for Mario, which makes gameplay even more fluid than it was in 64. Many shine sprites and blue coins, which are the game's reward system, are about cleaning up gunk and graffiti with said water. In sections where you are without Flood, the game has obstacle course levels that basically force you to keep moving. A lot of what we consider to be pretty static actually moves and changes as well. Walls move in and out of things, pipes actually sort of exist, and the camera follows you inside of structures and all of that stuff. The end Bowser fight happens in like a hot tub that you flip over. The hub world is much more open than it was in 64, which is, you know, more fluid. Also, instead of courses or levels or worlds, they're called stories, and I'm using the Japanese version here, which can be which can be fluid in nature due to like retellings and interpretations and all of that stuff. You look, I said it was the best I've got. Okay, I still think it's pretty good, but there's just something unsatisfying about it. I don't know. Like, you get some shine sprites for putting fruit into a basket and doing other such busy work. And what's annoying is that still fits within the game's theme, because technically having the rewards be given for doing random stuff is quite fluid. It's similar to Super Mario Bros. 3 in that way, where the theme's broadness allows much more to be included. And though I am not all that happy about it, this fluidity in design does result in another creativity explosion, which future, more satisfyingly cohesive games steal from. I think the main thing I don't like about this reading is that I'm trying to find order, only to conclude that the chaos is the order, which, even if true, is very unsatisfying. But anyway, as far as I can tell, Super Mario Sunshine is the fun of fluidity. Super Mario Galaxy. Throughout this journey, we began to see the theme of Mario games bleed into other aspects of the design. How the boss encounters are structured, what power-ups make it in or not, whether they use maps or hub worlds, etc. And Galaxy is a culmination of that. So with these small connections that we can make, let's see if we can decode the grand adventure that is Super Mario Galaxy. And I think the best place to start is the opening. The game begins with this nice storybook exposition, but then we get a massive tonal shift. Bowser is using his airships to assault Peach's castle. This scene feels like a war movie, with your perspective locked to Mario on the ground level as things explode all around, and ultimately you are helpless to prevent Bowser from wreaking havoc. The next thing that happens is Mario wakes up on a small planetoid where the music settles and you're given a moment to just collect yourself. Yeah. Once you've chased rabbits enough, you meet Rosalina to truly begin the adventure. And as you're going about things, this happens. There's a giant Goomba running around. Dispatching it gets you the key that allows you to progress, and then solving this puzzle rewards you with a grand star. Interesting. The first reward you get in the game is a bigger version of the regular star, which happens after taking out a bigger version of the regular Goomba. which occurs after a bigger, more epic opening of a regular kidnapping of Peach. Is Galaxy Big Land too? Not quite. I think the theme is scale, more broadly, and the opening has instances where you feel large as well, like when you chase the rabbits and having planetoids be smaller than what we would actually consider a planet-sized thing to be. Now, this technique of using the opening as sort of a microcosm of things to come is a technique that's used by the best films and literature, and so it's actually really cool to see it implemented in a video game like Super Mario Galaxy. That's just the opening though, and so to definitively say that the game is about scale, we need to look a bit deeper. Like Super Mario 64, this game uses sandboxes. But in Galaxy, they're called galaxies, which is quite brilliant as it makes the incomprehensibly large things feel quite small and quaint. The sandboxes themselves are also of a dual nature, with many being technically sandboxes, like in 64, but the stars shoot you off in very specific paths that are more akin to 2D levels. This is a combining of the grand exploration of the sandbox design of 64 to the quaint simplicity of 2D levels. Check out how the first boss, which is this huge piranha plant-like thing, is set up wonderfully by having you come across this one regular-sized piranha plant first. Many of the other bosses are set up in a similar way, but it also works in reverse. This spinning top boss being a smaller version of the larger stage that you just platformed on. Enemies aren't the only thing that get this treatment either. Certain Lumas, if fed star bits, i.e. small parts of stars, can transform into new, larger levels and even galaxies. The hub world is this huge playground, but you can only access a small part of it to begin with, and even as it expands, the observatories that you enter remain as tiny rooms that open up to the array of galaxies. When you enter a galaxy, you don't just start on the ground either, you fly in, making the entire thing feel small until you land where it may feel huge. The star launchers within a level reflect this as well, where you will start on the ground and then take this somewhat extravagant trajectory that gives you that larger perspective. This is technically inefficient from getting you playing the game, but they sacrifice that immediacy for the theme and the feelings it provides. The power-ups also invoke this in a way, as the Bee Suit and Spring Suit are basically just big versions of what we usually consider to be small. Even the Ice Flower allows you to scale waterfalls. I know that that doesn't play in other languages, but I still think it's pretty neat. And you know what else is neat? How the story in Galaxy, a Mario game, connects to the theme. So I've already mentioned that the game's opening is a microcosm for the rest of the experience in regards to the theme. So is it any wonder that they chose specifically to use a storybook opening? The delivery method that most likely makes you feel small and childlike. And then they immediately contrast this with the much more adult war scene. As a microcosm, it's perfect. And this is also reflected in the game's ending. The story ends with the entire universe being remade. But then, all of the major players are just chilling in one place, in one location, making the whole game feel small again. So much of the game is just alternating between big and small, not only in terms of design and aesthetics, but even emotionally. But what breaks my heart about Galaxy 1 is that the only major thing to break from this theme are the Bowser battles. You fight him 3 times, and you end up basically just playing ping pong with him. But thankfully, we have Galaxy 2 to come in and save the day. If you were paying attention to the end of the last video, or to the start of this one, you may have realized that Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are sort of lumped together. And the reason that's the case is because for the best picture, you need both games to be considered a singular work. So let's look into Galaxy 2 and see what its theme is. I think Galaxy 2 is almost entirely about trajectory. If you look at much of the level design, the flying from place to place is much more clinical. And in general, the levels are much bigger, but they are more focused and linear than they were before. The hub world was also shrunk to maintain a consistent size, and the map/game progression is now just a linear thing. Also look at the introduced power-ups. The drill is about movement through a planet. Yoshi swings on these flowers and eats hot peppers, which forces your speed such that you have to run an obstacle course with the correct trajectory or you fail. The boulder is the same, though it does work slightly with the scale theme. And this is the wonderful thing. Both games exhibit elements of the other. In Galaxy, there are things that tie exclusively into trajectory, and some things in Galaxy 2 that play with scale. But I think it's clear that each game has its own specific focus. So if we look at the Bowser battles in Galaxy 1, they make sense as a sort of transition point to Galaxy 2. This is excellent because the final Bowser battle in Galaxy 2 beautifully bookends the two games by fusing their themes. You then get this incredible experience of at first feeling tiny and childlike, being told the opening through a storybook, which almost immediately transitions to a big cinematic scene of Bowser raining down destruction, making you feel overcome by scale. Throughout the coming adventure, you experience what it is like to feel big, stomping around on small planetoids and hurling yourself around so that entire galaxies are within your field of view. To feeling small, scaling huge machines and being told a story by Rosalina. There are moments of calm introspection, contrasted with sweeping, bombastic grandeur. But scale, in and of itself, doesn't provide much of a challenge, and so trajectory is used to test your skills. This all culminates in a final encounter that has you battling a giant Bowser. This makes Mario feel small and insignificant like at the start. But now at the end, you are the one to rain destruction onto him. This ending allows you to feel the immense joy of being small and defeating something huge, of overcoming scale. Oh, yes. Now that's satisfying. I think we have a clear enough picture now of the series as a whole to answer the questions that I sort of had at the start of this video. And so if you take away anything from whatever this is, I hope it's that all of these games feel like they fit as part of the series because they're all trying to explore what it is that we find enjoyable. And that individually, all of them are each specifically trying to explore an aspect of that joy. And that's why the games are so consistently good and consistently cohesive as individual packages. And I think that's a much better explanation for why these games are so great than just whether or not they have like good mechanics or whatever. Man, it is exhausting playing that many Mario games all at once. And I still have one more to go. But luckily for me, though, there's probably no better game to take a break with than Mario's latest adventure and the latest creativity explosion from the series. So I hope you'll join me next time, where we can sit back, relax, and take in all of the sights, sounds, and locales of Super Mario Odyssey.